the lockdown here continues. So I've, in recent videos, recorded not necessarily a negative light, just indicative of like the direction that my interests are taking me. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is I currently do a live video game of my Just Plain Chaos rules. Now, when I say I'm not interested in buying rule sets, it's because I think you can actually write your own rules relatively easily. And I think it kind of empowers you to understand a bit more about probability and just look into the general rule systems and think critically about the rules that exist out there as well. So I have a podcast called My Rules Are Better, which outlines some of this, and a lot of it's just associated with me beating, hoarding, and working through a lead pile. Well, let's move on from that. So I have a rule set called Just Plain Chaos, which I talk about in My Rules Are Better and actively publish through the feed of My Rules Are Better as well. And I run a game of that every other Saturday in the morning, and I have players, some of whom have been participants in the podcast, some of whom I work with professionally, who play the game. So I think there's half a dozen folk that participate in that. And that really is a large part of my kind of social outing through this period of time, relating to, role-playing games, relating to war games. It's ideally, it's on that kind of cusp, skirmish role-playing game kind of area, the Just Plain Chaos rule system. And I use it for a variety of different settings, all within the same kind of dystopian future situation. And it's something that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about. I was originally going to run 4 sessions of it. We've finished the 3rd session this morning, and I got a lot of really positive feedback associated with continuing it on for probably another 3 or so sessions. I really want to break them into smaller groups. 6 is kind of my limit associated with these kind of things. 4, 3 are more ideal. 6 is just on the kind of edge of just the best possible game practices, basically. Making sure everyone has a turn, everyone's playing their character. I really don't like kind of, you've got 2 really strong characters and 4 folks that aren't really strong, and I try to break that up and move that around. But that is basically my social outing through the extended lockdown period. But also, so there's some discussions with like whether I'll formally publish the rules. I mean, really, the beauty of Just Plain Chaos as a rule system is it's like 6.5 pages of rules, basically. That's it. Less. So it's a relatively simple rule system, mainly generated on, I would like to say anyway, the environment. Like the environment that people are playing in is actually vastly more important than the rule system. So it's really kind of shrinking down the rules and expanding the storytelling, cathartic, role-playing game aspect. When it was done as a skirmish game, less so on the role-playing sense, but at least a fun game, some probability, didn't feel artificially weighted one way or the other. I've talked in My Rules Are Better about, there's a film called 1917. And 1917, as a film, there's a better film called The End of the Line about the First World War, which I would recommend. I think it's called The End of the Line, which I think is, thinking-wise, better than 1917. 1917 is visually spectacular. It's just filmed an amazing movie. So I can't take that away from it. But the notion of 1917 is you have, I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers, you have 2 guys that are basically going up against 2 Brits that are going up against the German forces in the Second World War. Like, through a series of curious things, I mean, that's what it appears through a majority of the film. And I feel the same is true with regards to the way that I like to create these games, where you have a overwhelming sense of not necessarily hopelessness, but just that against overwhelming odds, you're able to, work your way through whatever is going on. And that, to me, is really the framing of these games, is to create an environment where the player at any time feels that they are not capable of resolving the situation, but somehow they manage to work their way through it. And I think that's a really interesting means of setting narrative. It's a really interesting way of kind of framing a problem space. And So the game today, I had done, so the first two games I'd done a lot of background planning for. This one I'd done less background planning for. And it just occurred to me that wouldn't it be interesting if rather than going through this bombed out city, which is what they're doing currently while the bombs are literally dropping, what's the easiest way to do this? Well, maybe there's a sewer system. And that only really came to me this morning, like first thing. I was like, maybe there's a sewer system, and what could be interesting through that? And it completely changed the scenario that I had planned out for today. It just changed its direction, basically. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting elements that I like putting in my games. The fact that it's near dark future or really contemporary means that it's dealing with a problem space where it's not Dungeons and Dragons. There are no goblins, there are no orcs. I love goblins and orcs, but there aren't any. It is a different problem space. But yeah, I'm certainly having a lot of fun with it, and my team, the crew that want to be part of this thing, or are currently participating in it, are certainly very gung-ho about it. So that is my main out currently. That's my main kind of means of catharsis. And when we did the debrief at the end of the game today, I pointed out to them that really the social aspect of this thing is by far the most important thing for me. The underlying rules development, the testing of various ideas, really very secondary compared to the social aspect of this thing. So when I discard rule systems and these things, it's not to be negative about that aspect of it. It's just to say that there's something that can replace that, which I think is more interesting to me, at least. So that's what I'm trying to prescribe. Not to say, all the stuff that has been done previously is all garbage, but just to say that there are things that interest me currently that don't relate to having to purchase rule systems, that relate to actually means of exploring other things, probability, various settings, this kind of stuff. So I wanted to record a video just to try and explain that. And if you have any questions, any comments, please leave them. Please subscribe as well if you like these discussions. I'll try to put more of these out there. And apologies for the COVID hair. It's going to be getting better.